Should Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds be voted into the Hall of Fame?
Roger Clemens should not. Barry Bonds should. And I don't take this position, Max, due to statistics. Statistically speaking, in terms of their level of production on the field, there is no question in my mind that both are Hall of Famers. I think that Roger Clemens is shaky in times, because obviously, the drug use and what have you that we allude to, PEDs, we get all of that. I think that he's not as surefire as Barry Bonds, but I think when you talk about 7 Cy Young Awards, it's undeniable. And plus, he's a champion, so we got to give credit where credit is due in that regard. To me, it comes down to this situation. It's just personal. It has nothing to do with what anybody else wants to bring up about baseball. I think about Barry Bonds, and I think about how Mark McGwire was so celebrated, and the whole home run chase, and the game of shadows, and how Mark Fennerawada and Williams and those boys alluded to in excerpts to Sports Illustrated, if I remember correctly, how Bonds was essentially jealous because he was en route to the Hall of Fame until he saw these guys getting the accolades that they received and said, oh, so it doesn't matter, that I'm a 30 for 30 guy. It doesn't matter that I steal bases, that, that I hit percentage-wise, that I sit up there and I hit home runs, I hit doubles, I hit singles, I hit triples. It doesn't matter that I'm a gold glover. None of that matters because I'm smacking home runs. So he started doing, supposedly, purportedly, he started doing what ultimately he was doing with the cream and the clear and all of that stuff, all right? To me, that is entirely different than a guy like Roger Clemens, who was in the retirement. Nobody was bothering you. They were preoccupied with other stuff, and you and your idiotic self sat up there and dared these people to subpoena you, dared these people to bring you to Capitol Hill, dared these people to warrant to have some kind of investigation to find out whether or not you were a PED user or not. I think Roger Clemens should be banned from a Hall of Fame for sheer stupidity. That has been my position for years. I have held on to it for years, and I will never change in that regard because unlike others, nobody was bothering Roger Clemens. He brought that on himself. And that is my position with him, whereas with Barry Bonds, obviously, I feel differently.
Before I get into them, I just want to say about Mariano Rivera.
Congratulations.
Wow. ERA plus, adjusted ERA, adjusts for ballpark and error to kind of level it so ERA is a consistent stat. Of all pitchers in the history of baseball with over 1,000 innings pitched, he has the lowest, meaning inning for inning, he's the best of all time, right?
Was it like 0.7?
No, it was. It's in the low 2s. His postseason ERA, in over 140 innings pitched, is 1/3. That's 0.7.
Yes.
His regular. So the best ever inning for inning in the history of baseball, when you needed him most, got 3 times better. Even though he was only pitching an inning or 2 at a time, there's a very good argument he's the greatest pitcher who ever lived. Congratulations to Mariano Rivera, the first unanimously selected Hall of Famer in history.
Well deserved.
I'm so glad it's him. Now, Bonds and McGwire. I know you have a certain point to make about that. So let me just say this. Molly, Stephen A., a lot of people seem to struggle with this topic of Bonds and McGwire, and Bonds and Clemens. I'm going to get to McGwire and Sosa in a second. Bonds and Clemens. A lot of people struggle with this issue. And this is so clear-cut to me, it's so obvious, that I think the only way to handle this is to make me in charge. I will make all the decisions about this because apparently everyone else in the world has a hard time. This is so simple. It is totally obvious when these guys started juicing. Oh, you can't say started juicing, it's allegedly reported. Physical evidence. In other words, a guy puts on 30 pounds of lean muscle mass in too short a time. His forehead expands, and then his home run to at-bat ratio doubles at an age where everyone else in history has declined. Physical evidence is much more compelling than direct evidence sometimes. A receipt from Balco. You can forge a receipt from Balco. You can't forge 30 pounds of lean muscle mass and doubling your home run rate. Okay. We know exactly when these guys started juicing. Clemens was in decline. He was still an effective pitcher, but no longer the dominant great pitcher of the American League after he'd won 3 Cy Youngs when he signed a deal in Toronto. And then won back-to-back pitching triple crowns, wins, ERA, and strikeouts. He was the dominant pitcher in the American League again, maybe better than he'd ever been in Toronto. All of a sudden, his fastball, everything's back for Roger Clemens. How did that happen? Duh, right? Barry Bonds. You're right, Stephen A. Brian Kenny and I, who now does MLB Network. And Brian Kenny and I used to do Friday Night Fights on ESPN too. And during commercial breaks at times, we're big baseball fans, we'd be geeking out. We'd be like, damn, isn't it a shame that Bonds missed this steroids era? Look at what these other guys are doing. He's still as good as them, but he's not hitting the home runs. Bonds was like, And as usual, he got hurt. And then coming back from injury, you start to see him put up on-base percentages. Guys, not in the high 4s because he was one of the greatest of all. In the 5s, he once had an on-base percentage once he started juicing. Over 60% in the 600, slugging over 800. Okay, so how does this all add up to whether or not they belong in the Hall of Fame? It's very clear. Since you know exactly when they started juicing, you have to be a fool not to see it. Were they Hall of Famers when they started juicing, yes or no? With Bonds, it is clear. He was a first ballot, no doubt, one of the 3 or 4 greatest left fielders in history, Hall of Famer. Ted Williams, Stan Musial, Ricky Henderson, Barry Bonds. He's in. It's a joke not to put him in. Once he started juicing, he became the greatest hitter who ever lived, better even than Babe Ruth. He didn't need that to be in the Hall of Fame. Roger Clemens was a borderline Hall of Famer once he got to Toronto. So that's your judgment call. Take what he did until Toronto and say, is that a Hall of Famer? I would actually say yes, in the way Roy Halladay is a Hall of Famer. He won 3 Cy. He was always up there in Cy Young voting. It wasn't a very long career at that point, but it was dominant. Borderline on Clemens. I would lean toward yes on him based on what he'd already accomplished. Guys, this ain't that hard.
Well, listen, it's never been hard for me, but my position is very, very clear. Last year in Boston, Roger Clemens was 10-13, ERA like around 3.6.
But he led the league in strikeouts.
Yeah, very next year in Toronto, 21-7. Right. ERA of 2. I mean, you just sit there looking at it and like, wait a minute, when the hell did this happen? So obviously the timetable that you're pointing out, absolutely accurate, right on point, because that's where we were looking at Roger Clemens and saying, what the hell is going on? We have never looked at Barry Bonds at any point in his career and questioned whether or not he was a future Hall of Famer. Ever. We've never looked at him. From day one, we watched this brother perform, and we knew